My name's Michael Hamilton. I'm one of the directors of the Ubele Initiative. I know that many of the people on screen will know the Ubele Initiative, but for those of you who don't, we're an African diaspora-led infrastructure plus organization. We believe in empowering minoritized communities in the UK and to act as a catalyst for social and economic change. Our mission is to achieve this work with community leaders, with community groups, with organizations in the UK, to strengthen their resilience and to hear and open their voice. Our values are that we're collaborative, we're community rooted, we're enabling, we're experimental, we're innovative, and we're intergenerational. And if you want to know more about us, just go to our website, which is www.ubele.org. Thanks for coming. We're going to put the, shall we put the agenda on? We're going to open with my welcome and introductions, which is what I've just done. And then we're going to kind of speak to Radhika, who's one of the funders from Impact on Urban Health, who was kind of heavily involved in this project. And she'll talk about kind of why she thought this project was an important project to do. And later on, again, she'll talk about maybe some of the impact that the project had on her as a funder. We're then going to listen to some of the people who were participants of the project, and we're going to listen to what that kind of experience meant to them. And we're going to get to a kind of a close with Patrick Vernon, and Patrick Vernon's going to introduce himself a bit later on, but he's been a kind of mighty leader in the Black community and has led all sorts of interventions over a whole number of years. And I'll be really interested at the end to hear kind of what Patrick has felt and thought and has experienced by listening to the experiences of the people that have been involved in the safety project. We felt that it was important to kind of share this aspect of the work, because this aspect of the work, really what Black systems change is, has kind of really been teaching us something, not just about this piece of work, but about how we kind of organize in the struggle, about where the struggle against race, against racial disadvantage, against racism is now. And I think that there are some kind of roots which are beginning to tell us something else about what we need to be doing in this space as activists, as leaders, as civil society. And so I won't go on too long. Everybody in the project will tell you I can go on forever. But I'm going to ask Radhika to come into the space now, and Radhika to perhaps give us a framing of how this project came about and why this project came about.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, so my name is Radhika Vine and I work at Impact on Urban Health, who are a funder based in South East London. And I did this, so I'm here representing the work that was done, but there was a team of us that did this work. So Rihanna, who's on the call, Steph, Arel, and Kamna. So there was a group of us that were really thinking about how could, the context for Impact on Urban Health is that our priority is health inequalities. So we are based in South London, in Lambeth and Southwark, and our focus is how can we reduce the health inequalities that are so blatantly obvious to all of us. And health inequalities is this massive, big thing. And so the way Impact on Urban Health works is it identifies priorities, themes, and it takes a kind of thematic approach. And so we have 4 themes that we're working on at the moment. And at the point at the start of this project, we were thinking, well, how should we choose the next themes that we're going to do? When we pick up new things as we go. So how should we think about the next ones? And in that conversation, we wanted very much to center the expertise in our communities to help us to make those decisions. Historically, these decisions are often made in offices with consultants and post-its and people, and experts of a particular type. And we were at this point, we were thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually start to make these sorts of strategic decisions with the experts in our communities, the people who really know Lambeth and Southwark, you know, who have the deepest and best understanding of Lambeth and Southwark. How could we bring them in to help us to make strategic decisions? So that was where we started saying, how can we bring community leaders in? And then the second thing was, well, let's explore something big and meaty together. And so we landed on safety as a theme, because of course, if you live or work in London, in South London, this is a this is a challenge that we all live with all the time, and feelings of lack of safety, feelings of vulnerability. So we chose safety as a big theme. And what we wanted to do was to work with this group of leaders to explore this theme, to think about how might we spend money to improve safety. We hadn't decided. Safety was selected as a theme, as a kind of test. Could we, you know, let's explore this theme. And so we came together and we worked. We were very, very fortunate to meet up with Ubele and Reos, who were the people who helped us to come up with a methodology. So the social lab that you'll hear about today is their methodology. It's something that they came to us with and said, look, if you want to explore this challenge, we have a methodology that we could try. And so that was entirely theirs. And we then worked with the key partners that Impact and Urban Health already had relationships with. Many of the people that were involved in the project, people we were already working with. And I guess the biggest thing of all was, well, no, it was all big, but at the end of it, there was a pot of money. So this is a way of doing systemic thinking, taking a systems change approach to actually deploying resources. So that's what that's what the funder perspective on it was. And I'm now going to hand over to them.
Before you do, Radhika, I'm aware that there are a lot of people on the web involved in today's conversation who are not London based and might not even be UK based. And so I wonder if we could just say what Lambeth and Southwark are to help them understand the rest of the conversation that we're going to have. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Yes. So basically, these are two neighbourhoods, boroughs, and metropolitan districts in South London, and the characteristics are they are highly diverse. They are inner city communities with the range of inequality that you get in a capital city. So very, very wealthy people living in amazing, living very nice lives, and people for whom there are lots of challenges around housing, around employment, around health. So, and all of us living cheek by jowl, right next to each other. So that's the kind of demographic context. And specifically in Lambeth and Southwark, the largest minoritized communities are Black. So Black African, Black Caribbean. And those communities have been established in these areas of South London for generations. And those inequalities have sustained over generations.
Thanks. And over to you, Yannick, maybe to tell us a bit about the process and how it worked and what we did and why we did it.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Radhika. So my name is Yannick. I'm a senior associate at both Ubele and Reos Partners. And as one of the lead designers and facilitators, I've also been really heavily involved in this process. And so what I want to do in the next 7 to 10 minutes is to just give a bit of a broad overview of what we did during the process and share some of the key learnings that came out of it that can hopefully spark some of the conversations as we're moving forward. And so just to say, we've heard about Impact on Urban Health, a funder who's really committed to funding for equity and system change. The Ubele Initiative, an African diaspora-led infrastructure organization empowering Black and racially minoritized communities. And then the other organization in the mix is Reos Partners, an international social enterprise that helps people move forward together on their most important and intractable issues. And I guess what we found that it became quite an interesting mixture of organizations with different areas of expertise that were part of co-creating this process. And so the purpose of this process is kind of twofold. One of them was really what Radhika spoke to about on this notion of safety. And so one of the purposes was to remove the systemic barriers to safety for Black and racially minoritized communities in Lambeth and Suffolk. And as you heard, there was also more a methodological purpose, and it was about developing a new approach to what is called participatory grant making, or as Radhika said, redistributing resources, inspired by the social labs methodology. So there was a content purpose and a more methodological purpose at the center of this process. And so what we did was a series of 7-day, multi-day workshops and a series of learning journeys where the group went out and met with some of the most amazing and thought-provoking thought leaders, both in the area of participatory grant making and safety and any other interesting perspective that could enrich their understanding of the issue that they were addressing. We did that over a period of 18 months, ranging from July 2022 to December last year. We engaged about 15 to 20 community leaders and experts, and they were supported by Impact on Urban Health, by Ubele, and by Reos Partners. And as mentioned before, we adopted a social lab approach to participatory grant making, which was kind of the container for it all. And I'll just say quickly what a lab is, and I'll do it in 2 slides. So it's a big mashup. If you're interested in the methodology, there's much more to read up on. But just a key assumption that we're starting with is when we're working on safety in Lambeth and Suffolk, we're working in complexity, which means that things are highly interconnected, highly unpredictable, and change is happening really rapidly in a non-linear way. It is a complex mess of reality that we find ourselves in. And at the same time, many of us have been trained and educated to think in a completely different, linear, and more mechanistic way of change being predictable, helping us from a structured way from A to B. And often we find that the world outside is way more complex than that. And so we needed a methodology that is capable of working with that complexity. And that's where the social lab methodology comes in. And a social lab is a experimental process that really brings together diverse stakeholders to tackle a complex issue. And in that lab, communities of experts explore how to work with the emergence of a selected issue, and they jointly design and test prototypes and solutions, both in the lab itself and beyond. Underneath all of that, there is a systemic, collaborative, and innovative outlook to the world and the work that we're doing. And those were the fundamentals of the process that we went through. But I guess what's important here to note is that it is an action-oriented process. The purpose of it is really to intervene in the world and learn from the interventions that we're doing, and therefore working towards these prototypes and solutions. And so I kind of want to reiterate the purpose that we set off with, which was contribute to removing the systemic barriers to safety for Black and racially minoritized communities in Lambeth and Suffolk, as these systemic barriers became quite evident and visible in the portfolio of prototypes that was created by the group in this process. So I'll quickly speak to those because they speak to those systemic barriers that were discovered through the process. So the first prototype is Wakanda Assets, and it's really aimed at investing in assets for intergenerational wealth and economic prosperity in Black and racially minoritized communities, coming from an understanding that one of the main barriers to safety was actually a lack of assets. A second prototype is really aimed at reimagining funding and exploring the question about what it really means to transform the power relationship between funder and grantees. The third prototype was focused on race equity in education and actually was named Black Ofsted. And for those of you who are not in the UK, understanding that Ofsted is one of the highest leverage points to intervene in the educational system. And there was a moment, I think we all remember that moment, but there was a collective curiosity and a what if kind of questioning, like what if race equity becomes at the center of that Ofsted piece? And there was, I don't know, I think for those of us involved, there was this collective clarity that started to show itself. And so there's a prototype really aiming to intervene at that level. And finally, the fourth prototype is around crime and justice and policing, which was a really interesting conversation in of itself, because it came to the center of the exploration and then moved back to the periphery again, and came to the center and moved back to the periphery. And there was something about a shared understanding about how that is a system in and of itself that needs a whole separate conversation of intervening. And so this prototype really sets out to explore that in more depth in the future. So as you can hopefully see, these are all addressing some of the systemic barriers that people are facing to safety. And they're all interconnected and having different intervention points in the system to address that. And so I know that it's often really hard, like when we talk about this work, to actually get an understanding of what it looks and feels like. So what we want to do is just offer you a few pictures, just for you to get a sense and a little bit of a feel of the room and the process that we went through. And so I'll come back using the same pictures to focus our attention a little bit more to some of the questions that you also signed up for, around how can centering lived experience leadership promote equitable systems change? What might Black-led system change look, feel, taste, and smell like? And so we just want to share a couple of key learnings, key insights that we've gained throughout this process. And the first one is actually about the quality that was alive in the room. And what we learned by that was that lived experience and subject matter expertise create a really nuanced understanding of how a system actually works and not how it's supposed to work. And so I guess what happened here was that there was a group of people who don't only have the lived experience of what it means to be unsafe and working on safety in their communities, but they also had massive content expertise, writing dissertations, training other folks in police departments and young folks. And this combination really created a nuanced understanding of how a system actually works. And in addition to that, a fully Black-led process with Black people in the room, but also on the organizing team, on the facilitation team, the funders that came into the room really allowed for Black perspectives to come to the center and actually move from the margins where we often see them to the center of exploration, which leads to very different outcomes. So there was something really important about having this notion of lived experience leadership throughout the whole exploration in every role and every function of the process. Another key insight that came to us actually was, as to use the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, is how important it is to move with the speed of trust. And so the picture that you're seeing in the background is actually a picture that represents almost £500,000 being distributed on Post-it notes. And so what we learned, this is taken on one of the last days of the workshops. And what we learned was that trustworthy relationships are so important, especially in communities that are suffering from structural racism and historical injustices, that trust is really hard to earn and easy to lose. And so moving with the speed of trust and learning how to do that becomes really important and quite crucial in processes like this, especially when we're dealing with participatory grant making and where resources are involved. And so actually critical connections become more important than critical mass. And I guess finally, another key insight that we gained was how important it is to bring our diversity of cultures into the container, and that it becomes a key enabler for learning and co-creation. And so throughout the whole process, we sang Yoruba songs together, we ate jollof, we danced like capoeira warriors, and we all brought our diversity of cultures into the room. And what it showed us, what that often that is seen as a nice to have, But what we learned is that it wasn't necessarily a nice to have, but actually quite a fundamental piece as a key enabler for learning and co-creation. And so I guess at the end of the day, I think one of the key reflections or key insights that we have was that by doing this process in the way we did it, we weren't creating a seat at a table, but we were actually creating a whole new table together. And so I guess I'll leave it at that. And I'm really excited to actually bring in the voices of the people who've gone through the process and some of these amazing experience. So, Joel, I think I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Yannick. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joel Dunn, and I'm the CEO and founder of a grassroots organization called Paradigm Project, which is focused on tackling inequity in education. We're based in South London. Yes, so as Yannick said, I participated in this process. I think it was remarkable in how it challenged the traditional power dynamics between leaders and funders in the voluntary sector. In the voluntary sector, there often exists a palpable us and them dynamic between organizations and funders. And this divide is not just a perception, but is compounded by fluctuating trends, political cycles, and ever-changing buzzwords that seem to kind of just dictate how funds can be accessed. For instance, one year the focus might be on innovation, and the next it's all about sustainability. So navigating these shifts can be incredibly challenging. And then when we zoom in on the Black voluntary sector, these issues become even more intricate. The sector is laden with additional layers of complexity, historical marginalization, systemic inequalities, and cultural nuances that all contribute to a unique set of challenges. And leaders in this space, often, like myself, often find themselves fighting not just for resources, but also for recognition and respect. And this process was a breath of fresh air because it brought funders and leaders together in the same room and fostered an environment of collaboration rather than competition. Leaders were positioned as experts, and it helped to recognize their deep contextual understanding of their communities. This was not just about ticking boxes, it was a genuine engagement and partnership process. I think one of the most significant aspects of this process for me was how it reframed lived experience. Traditionally, funding applications, and this has been a lot of my personal experience, have required leaders to recount their traumatic experiences to justify their need for support. And this felt like it could have gone that way with a group of Black leaders in the space, but instead it felt like it flipped that narrative, and lived experiences were valued not just as stories of struggle, but as sources of profound expertise. It acknowledged that those who have lived through the challenges often possess the deepest insights and the most innovative solutions. For me, I think the process fundamentally challenged the power dynamics between funders and Black leaders, and it was more than just about money. It was about trust and respect. The funders were not just seen as gatekeepers of resources, but as partners in creating change. And this shift in perspective was transformative. So I'm going to hand over to Margaret to share her reflections.
Thank you, Joel. I think I'm going to talk a bit more about the feeling of being in the space. It was, I feel really privileged to have gone through this process. It was so well curated and facilitated by Ubele and Reos in the form of Yannick, and it was. I'm CEO of an organization in Brixton that works with young people, and we're working in a very anxiety-filled, trauma-filled space. So coming into that space, we're always running and trying to make things happen. And then we were asked to come into this space and think about safety. And so I would sort of think about safety and solutions. Normally, I'd go sit down and just do, how do you do that? What change can you make? But in this space, the way in which it was curated, we were able to, first of all, find ourselves and feel grounded you know, through the exercises, through the singing, through just being, feeling safe in the space. And there was a process that they took us through. The whole process was called the U process. And it was about going into, rather than going across and finding, having a problem and just going to looking for the solution, we went through a deep process of learning a bit more about ourselves, learning a bit more about each other, and connecting with each other before then going into understanding what safety meant. And for me, what safety meant changed from trying to keep people in the community safe, like by just doing delivery and interventions, to thinking about reimagining funding. So it was a very new way for me. My way of thinking has totally changed around systemic thinking. It's allowed me to think differently about systems change, and the relationships that were built in that space, and the trust that was built in that space has laid a foundation for us to come together and work together on different things at different times. Because I think that because of the work that we did together, even though we don't see each other for a while, when we come back together, we've got a shared experience which can be built upon and which can be developed. And the trust that's there will mean that we can, rather than having to build that trust when we get back together again, it's there, and then we can begin to create something new, special, whatever we need to do together. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there. I hope that's clear. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there.
Thanks very much, Margaret. Thanks very much, Joel and Yannick. I remember a really long conversation between Yannick and I as we were looking at how this project might happen. And I remember a question about what it would mean to have the funder in the room, and what that might feel like to participants, what it might feel like to us, and what it might feel like to them. And I'm going to invite Radhika really to talk about what it was like for her as a funder in the room, and what being a funder in the room looked, smelled, felt was like for her. Radhika.
Thank you. Yes, there were 3 or 4 of us in this project, and in every workshop, it was a series of workshops. In every workshop, there were 2 or 3 of us in there who were sitting in the organization, you know, sitting in the funder organization. But we sat in circles, and it was and we were generously brought in. So, you know, that them and us thing was the way the sessions were facilitated. The way we entered in the space was to create a circle and where we were all doing this together. So partly it required quite a lot of commitment in terms of time, and also like recognize, you know, and going through the process. This was hard work. We did hard things together. We sang and we ate jollof rice, but we also did lots of hard work. And you know, you had to kind of stay in there and do it. And really, for me, the most surprising thing of it all was the outcomes. That if a group of colleagues and I had sat together and said, safety, what should we do about safety? What are the ways? We would have done all sorts of interesting conversations. We'd have brought researchers in, we'd have done things, but I very much doubt we would have ended up at Wakanda Assets or Black Ofsted or reimagining funding. You know, these are so what this process has showed me is you know, from my experience of sitting in the funder role, is that when you ask communities and you bring communities through a process, the answers they come to are going to be very different. And that's the hope, because we have been going around working on inequality for decades. Numbers of us have been, me, Patrick, Michael, we've been doing it forever. Well, we've been, Patrick and Ola, how many years ago? We've been at this going around this circle of trying to tackle inequalities for a long time. And it don't feel like we're making anything like enough progress. And for me, this project has made me think, oh, it's the wrong people making the decisions. Like if we can change who gets to make those decisions, who gets to make the for me that was an extraordinary penny dropping. I mean, I think we kind of knew it would be different, but I don't think I certainly didn't know it was going to be this different. So that's been really, that was a really amazing thing. The other things were that there was a lot of conversation about power, like internally and amongst the team, and also in Impact and Urban Health, we're talking about power. We're conscious of it, and we wanted to be thoughtful and to acknowledge that power and to think about it in concrete terms, and be intentional about it. And this project really put that to the test. We had to, because there were moments where I think, oh my goodness, what, seriously, this is where it's going. It did make me a bit nervous, because I had to take it back, and me and the rest of the team that were there, we have to take it back and sell it into our organization. And so, so that was, but also I was very open. I shared that with the teams, like, well, this is a bit hard, guys, and so we talked about it. And so that felt like really freeing. And I think Yannick's point about the whole new table, this did create a whole new table. And for me, ultimately, it's just such hope that, well, firstly, the acknowledgement of the extraordinary expertise that we have, that, in Margaret, in Joel, in the rest of the team that were there, we have decades of a type of expertise that really in the organizations that are making these decisions, we don't have. And to bring them, to have, it was a pool of most incredible kind of rich depth. So that was, yeah, I mean, I could go on, but I'm going to stop there.
Very much. Thank you. Patrick. Hello.
Yeah, hi there.
How are you doing?
Yeah, fine, thank you very much.
And so, Patrick, you've heard a lot of this for the very, very first time, and I know it's for the very, very first time. And as somebody that's been involved in, I know that you've been involved in this as a funder, as a fundee, as a innovator, as an entrepreneur, as a everything. What struck you in the conversations that you've heard?
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. So I'm Patrick Vernon, everyone, from wherever you are around the world. So it's interesting because I think the concept of Black system leadership is new and evolving. I can remember when I was working in Lambeth, I was director of Black Thrive back in 2017, and we started to talk. We just talked about system leadership. We didn't talk about Black system leadership, and that was really predicated on the model that if we could work with philanthropists and funders, develop a concept, a theory of change, and then with that theory of change, we could then demonstrate what was the impact we wanted to do. So the impact was about how can you look at reducing health inequalities, racial inequalities in the mental health system for the Black community. Basically, that was a model, and that was a model. And I think that built on that is now Thrive Global and doing other stuff. So that's my first kind of experience of being involved in that, and now I've been doing different roles over the years. I'm just kind of reflecting what everyone said, and I think bigger than the point that Dika talked about, it's all about sharing power. It's ultimately about sharing power. For far too long, lots of Black-led initiatives and minoritized communities have tried to say, give us the crumb, give us the money, and it's always been allocated on the basis that we'll give you, we believe, subject to your funded application or how you present yourself or need, or whether we like you or not, we're going to give you X amount. and come back for more if you do a good job. What's quite clear, there's a shift, and this shift's been happening for a number of years. And I think in terms of the murder of George Floyd, 4 years ago, and the reverberations around the world, and even recently what's happened with the whole situation in terms of Gaza, people are now saying, we don't trust formal institutions, we want to have a greater say and influence, and we've got the solutions. We've got the solutions already, thank you very much. So it's changed the paradigm. I've been in the community for the Church of England for the last 8-9 months, where the Church of England apologised some years ago for their involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. They set up, they made a pledge that they would give £100 million. Then they formed an advisory committee, and I was on that committee along with other people. And I can remember the very first meeting that we had on the advisory committee. We all said, where did you come to that rationale of £100 million? What was that based on? And so in our recommendations, which came out a few months ago, we said that the church, through a negotiation and conversations and community dialogue, we actually consulted a whole range of stakeholders. At least the minimum you need to think about is about £1 billion, because Church of England have made billions and billions from the transatlantic slave trade, and you're offering not even 1%. So that changed that conversation shifted the church commissioners, not Church of England, church commissioners, because church commissioners hold the money on behalf of the Church of England. It's very complicated. So the point I'm trying to make here, my interpretation of what I've heard, black system leadership is about saying we are equal partners based on our lived experience. Some of us will have data that we might have done some research work. Some of it will be intel and gut feeling. And whatever you want to describe that, we want to use the data that we know from a community perspective and our own lived experiences and leadership to work with you to co-produce a joint way of tackling a problem, a social issue. And it's interesting you use the word community safety, because I'm involved in an initiative in Hackney where I was approached by Hackney Council. They asked me to chair a community advisory board. And this community advisory board, they've created this concept called Hackney Thinking Spaces, where as a result of what happened a couple of years ago, you probably heard of what happened to the black teenager, Charles Q, who was, for those international listeners, about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a black teenager, 15 years old. Teachers suspected, or allegedly suspected, that she was smoking. She smelled of cannabis or had cannabis. She was about to take her exams. She was actually on a period at the time. They called the police without even informing her parents or guardians, and she was strip searched at school. Yeah, at school, a 15-year-old black girl. This happened during the time of COVID, by the way. So we didn't know anything about this until about 18 months, 2 years ago, when there was an independent report commissioned by Hackney Council around safeguarding. And that report caused a major reverberation in Britain, because we then found out that this pattern of strip searching happened. It's systematic, it's quite common, and it's always targeting young black boys and girls. So you think that a school would be a place of safety, yeah? It's changed the concept of what is a place of safety, when parents are thinking, hold on, how will I know that my child is not only getting a good education, but they feel that they can bring their authentic self to school. We use this expression, bring authentic self to work. What about bring yourself to school? So as a result of what happened, and there was a big debate in Britain about this, and it's still ongoing, by the way. It's raised lots of issues about policing in school, whole range of issues. And on top of that, what's happened around the whole issue around racial trauma and community trauma combined. There's a kind of partnership. So I've recruited 18 members from the community in Hackney, residents, some council staff, but majority of residents, And we use this concept of thinking spaces to look at solutions around community trauma, community safety. It's very similar to safety. I think it's very, I mean, whether you call it community trauma or safety, I think there's a definite relationship. And on top of that, the council have commissioned a black black therapists, an organisation called I Family Counselling, and they're having separate conversations in the community with young people, separate conversations with young women, young men, older black men, older black women, LGBTQI, just to explore what is community trauma. And we're hoping for these community conversations and the board to come up with solutions. So sorry, it's a bit long-winded there, Michael. The point I'm trying to make to you, there is lots of things happening in Northwest London. Black community organisations are working with the Northwest London Integrated Care Board to try and develop a black agenda around health inequalities, and they want to develop model co-production. There is a change in the mood over the last few years around co-production. I know we've had this expression before, co-production. Nothing without me, without me.
I suppose the place that we arrived at with co-production and with social labs is one of our learnings is the importance of who is in the room. Because normally in a lab space, you'd have all sorts of players in the room, including a couple of black people. And what would happen is that the black people's voice would still sit at the margins of the room. What we attempted to do in this was to ensure that the black voice, the black perspective, was central to what was going on. And in order to do that, we needed to close the space. I'm interested, I'm kind of thinking back many years ago to when I was at college and agreeing with my friends that we wouldn't go to meetings where there were less than 4 of us, because sometimes we would be asked to say things, or we would want to say things, and we'd think we were mad from the responses that people were making back to us. I'm thinking about your experience with the Church of England and about your other experiences. How important is there that there is how do you center the black voice? How do you center the black perspective in those spaces?
You know, it's very difficult unless an organisation. So, for example, the Church of England made a policy decision. Right, if we're going to talk about, they're not using it. It's not reparations. They've called it repair of the harm, because it doesn't fit it doesn't complete. It doesn't. I mean, they have difficulty with the word anyway. But secondly, if you use the UN definition of reparations, it's not the complete Monty. It's just an element of that. So we've kind of agreed it's repairing the harm of what the church have done to black people over the last 400 years, basically. So they recognise they had to have a black-led perspective and black-led membership on the advisory group. That is a starting point. If you start from a perspective on an issue that's central to us, and we're in the minority, it's not going to work. And this is the message I think it's going to be even more so. We're in the middle of a general election in the UK, and whoever gets into power next week, if they're serious about tackling, look at issues around racial equity, whatever community they're engaging with, or whatever issue, we've got to be in the driving seat to influence either the resourcing, the decision making, or whatever it is that's required.
Thanks very, very much, Patrick. It's really, really good to get your perspective, and it's really good to hear about things that are happening in our community, not just in London, but you know, across the UK, and this movement that we've now become a part of as well, of kind of finding new ways of centering the black perspective in decision making, as in the work you're doing in Hackney. With Hackney Council, I'd just like to invite people to put some questions or some comments or some thoughts into the chat. We've maybe got about 10 or 12 minutes to deal with some questions and some thoughts. There is just one question which has already come that I'd like each of the panelists maybe to attempt this question, and I suppose it's a question that is central to this webinar and the work that we've been doing, And what I'd like your answer to is, what would your advice be for other funders interested in funding or supporting systemic change? And because I know that Yannick probably always has words. Let's start with you, Yannick. What might be your advice to funders interested in funding and supporting systemic change?
So for me, thank you for that, Michael. So for me, it like key in that question is, are you supporting systems change or are you supporting Black systems change? For me, it's actually a key difference to make a distinction between that, because I guess there's lots of stuff being said around like system change, how to fund with that, doing it holistically, making sure that you have long-term engagement, like all of that stuff. But I guess, at least for me, what's really interesting about the work that we did is this exploration, like how do you do Black system change? And I guess it kind of ties back a little bit to what you said, Michael, around the importance of a Black perspective. And I guess for me, there was something about this shared positionality that the whole group had, and also what Joelle spoke about the importance of that experience and that nuanced understanding of a system. And actually this idea that folks who've been oppressed by a system often know best how to intervene in a specific system. And I would say, if you're capable of moving that wisdom from margin to center, I think that's key for funders to think about. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Yannick. Do you want to give it a go, Joel? What would your advice be to kind of funders thinking about doing systemic change?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I sat on the participant side rather than the organization side of the process, but I can imagine that at times it was quite complicated and there was lots of moving parts of the process to work with. And also I think because of the dynamic of challenging that power dynamic and being authentic to that, and that not just being another soundbite, and genuinely putting power in the hands of the participants or the leaders that you're trying to change things with. There's a phrase that one of my mentors always uses with me, and I find it frustrating, but I've started to live by it. And he always says to me, live with the looseness. And that's kind of like, you know, being adaptable to the different parts of the journey and the processes that you're going through. And I obviously, like I said, there's probably loads of conversations that have happened behind the scenes that I've not been privy to. But I could imagine that there was an element of, you know, needing to live with the looseness and being able to really press into that co-production process. Apologies for the dog barking.
Margaret, I know you've got to go because you've got a train to catch, and so we've only got you for another 3 minutes. Any response to that question?
I think it's similar to what Joel and Yannick have just said. I mean, I think power, the power dynamics are at the center of this. And if, as a funder, if you're going to enter this sort of process, you would have to be prepared to let go of some of your power, not or all of your power. So you kind of have to be in a space where you can just put down your power, and trust whatever system or whatever process. It's about trusting a process, isn't it? It's about allowing what's going to happen, and being adventurous as well. Because if we keep doing the same thing that we've always done, we're going to keep getting the same thing, right? So yeah, I think it's that whole thing around power, allowing the power that you have to be placed into the hands of the people that know what is needed to be done.
Thanks very much, Margaret. Do you want to say goodbye as
Bye-bye,
well?
everyone.
Because we
Thank
know
you
that
for
you've got
having
to
me.
run for a train. Thanks very much, Margaret.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks for your time. Thank you. Radhika, what advice would you give to other funders interested in funding and supporting systemic change?
So the first thing I would say is to really to trust the people around you. So I think for us, with the people we're working with are genuine experts. Like so once you recognize that these people know things that we don't know and have a depth of knowledge. I mean, in my whole career, I've been surrounded by people that know a lot more than I do. That that's part of my work. That's part for all of us. That's part of our working experience. That we gravitate to people who are wiser and brighter and smarter than we are, because that's how we get good work done. And this was exactly that. I was, it was a recognition and understanding these people are brighter and smarter and better, know much more. And so once you know, and you lean into that, these people know stuff and have a depth of expertise that I don't have, and that we in our organization don't have. Then, like with any expert-led situation, I am a sucker for. I'm always looking for wisdom. I'm always looking, somebody out somewhere surely has the answers, and so I do feel that I think so that the trust came through relationship, but also through really acknowledging that. And I think if at any point we slept back from that and said, actually, no, I think we might know a bit more than them, then I think we would have been in trouble. But that never happened. That, as I said, I did this with a team of others, and we were really clear about the expertise. And also we were very well held. I mean, in all honesty, Ubele, Michael, Yannick, you facilitated those rooms really skillfully. So I think there's something about leaning into really good facilitation. I mean, we've all been through bad facilitation, all of us, I'm sure, in the room, and know how unpleasant that can be. But this was really skilled, good facilitation. So you do need, I would say, you need a container, a vehicle that will hold us. And so I did feel like we were doing risky things, but the process I trusted, and the leaders I trusted. And so then in those murky things, like there were moments of so I would say to other funders, to build on the relationships you already have, the really skilled people around you who are in the communities and know that, to start there and then find really good partners. I would recommend these guys.
Thanks very much. Listen, there's another question while you're here. Yeah, and it's a question, and I'm gonna read it as it's written. Would you say that Black-led systems, is that within the current white supremacist, heteropatriarchal capitalist system, or within a new ideological system? Oh.
I mean, I'm working in the world I'm in now. I mean, I'm hoping that we're also creating the new world. But this is how we're going to get to the new world. So we are working within the model that we've got. It is broken. It is a mess. But I am talking about in this system, like in the world that we're in now, how we get to that new world this is the journey for me. This is how we will get there, by finding methods and tools and ways of centering different voices from the margin to the center. So I don't want to wait until the new world, new dawn has dawned. I don't want to wait until that comes before we wait for change. Change is going to come within the system we have now, and that's how the new system will emerge. That's my. Anybody else got a better answer? Please come in.
Somebody wants to connect with Yannick, who's also in Holland, and so Yannick's email address, yannick.wasma@ubele.org, will appear in the chat in a little while, so that person can connect with Yannick. I've got a hand up. I've got Annie Ikara. And is your hand up on purpose because you want to ask a question, or is your hand up just because you press the wrong button and do what I do?
Just put a question in the chat, in the Q&A.
Oh, you put a question in the chat. Well, what you're here now. Do you want to speak it? No. Okay.
Yeah. Here we go.
All right. Well, listen, we have come to time. We have come to 17:29, and we're supposed to end at 17:30, which we will. I would like to really thank everybody, not just the people that took part this evening, but everybody that's taken part in this piece of work, because you know, you're forever learning, and I've learned so much about myself, about our work, about what we're doing, about how we can do it, about the possibilities of it.